The Great Hall of Axis Prime was the most beautiful place in the known galaxy. Its walls were made of black stone that sparkled like a night sky full of stars. The ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it. 216 species sent their best representatives to sit in this hall, and together they called themselves the Galactic Concord. For 12,000 years, the Concord had ruled the galaxy. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had survived wars that burned entire star systems. They believed they had seen everything. Then, humanity arrived. 40 years ago, a small metal ship from a tiny blue planet called Earth had stumbled into Concord space. The humans were primitive by galactic standards. Their technology was crude. Their history was violent and bloody. But they were eager to learn, and the Concord allowed them to join as junior members. Now, on this day, Ambassador Daniel Carter stood alone in the center of the Great Hall. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 20 years serving humanity among the stars, and every one of those years showed on his face. Around him, in rising circles of seats carved from that same black stone, sat the representatives of the galaxy, the Vylori, beings made of living crystal that pulsed with inner light, the Kethmari, insect-like creatures with clicking mandibles and compound eyes, the Oroshan, tall and graceful with silver skin and 3 eyes, the Droon, massive six-limbed giants who moved with surprising grace, and so many others, each more strange and wonderful than the last. Daniel cleared his throat and began to speak. "Honored members of the Concord," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his heart. "I come before you today with a simple request. Humanity asks permission to expand our colonial boundary by 3 star systems." He pressed a button on his wrist device, and a holographic map appeared in the air above him. 3 small dots of light blinked at the edge of human space. "These systems were discovered by human explorers," Daniel continued. "They were mapped by human scientists. They were developed by human workers. No other species has claimed them. We ask only for what we have built with our own hands." He stopped speaking and waited. The silence stretched on for several long moments. Then, from the highest tier of seats, a figure rose. It was High Speaker Thesson, leader of the Vylori delegation and the most powerful voice in the Concord. His crystalline body glowed bright blue as he looked down at the human ambassador. "The humans ask for more," Thesson said. His voice echoed through the hall like music, but there was no kindness in it. "They always ask for more." Soft laughter rippled through the chamber. Daniel felt his cheeks grow hot, but he kept his expression calm. "They arrive in our galaxy with their crude vessels," Thesson continued, "and their violent history. A species that spent centuries killing each other over patches of dirt on their own planet. A species that nearly destroyed themselves with their own weapons. And now they demand to be treated as equals." More laughter. The Kethmari clicked their mandibles in amusement. The Oroshan whispered to each other behind elegant hands. Daniel stepped forward. "High Speaker, if I may respond. Earth has contributed more defensive patrols to the rim sectors in the last decade than any other member species. We have shared our medical advances freely with anyone who asked. We have sent our engineers to help build and repair stations across Concord space. We have done everything that was asked of us and more." The Droon representative rose from her seat. She was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, with 6 powerful limbs and eyes that seemed to look in all directions at once. "You have done what is expected of junior members," she said, her deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Nothing more. Your species is young, impatient. You do not understand your place in the order of things." Daniel felt anger building in his chest. but he pushed it down. He had been trained for this. He knew how to stay calm. "We understand our place," he said quietly. "We simply wish to grow, to contribute more, to become full partners in the galactic community." High Speaker Thesson made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Partners! You wish to be partners with civilizations that were building great works when your ancestors were still living in caves. You wish to sit as equals with species that have mastered the very fabric of space and time?" He shook his crystalline head slowly. "Your petition is denied. Let us put it to a vote, as tradition demands. But we all know the outcome." The vote was called. One by one, the representatives of 216 species cast their decisions. Not a single one voted in favor of humanity's request. Daniel stood in silence as the final count was announced. Complete rejection. Not one ally. Not one friend. But the worst was yet to come. High Speaker Thesson descended from his seat and walked slowly toward the center of the hall. He stopped just a few meters from Daniel and looked at him with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. "Let us speak plainly, Ambassador," Thesson said, and his voice carried to every corner of the great chamber. "Your people are tolerated here. Nothing more. You are useful as laborers. You make adequate soldiers for the more dangerous patrol routes. Your homeworld produces acceptable agricultural goods that some species find pleasant." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But you are not builders of civilizations. You are not creators of lasting works. You are not thinkers of great thoughts or dreamers of great dreams. You are temporary, a brief flash of activity in the long history of the galaxy. In 1,000 years, no one will remember your species existed." The chamber was completely silent now. Every eye was on the human ambassador. "Earth should be grateful," Thesson concluded, "that the Concord allows you a seat in this hall at all. Now return to your homeworld and tell your people to be content with what they have. That is my advice to you." Daniel Carter looked at the High Speaker for a long moment. His face showed nothing. No anger, no shame, no fear. Just a quiet, thoughtful expression that the Violori could not read. "I understand," Daniel said softly. He nodded once, turned his back on the assembled representatives of the galaxy, and walked out of the great hall. No one tried to stop him. No one called after him. The ancient doors closed behind him with a sound like the ending of something that could never be begun again. Back on Earth, the broadcast of the council session played on every screen in every home on the planet. 7 billion humans watched in silence as their ambassador was mocked and dismissed. 7 billion humans heard themselves called temporary, forgettable, unimportant. And 7 billion humans began to understand that everything was about to change. 3 days after the humiliation at Axis Prime, President Kate Morrison sat in the Situation Room beneath the White House. The room was cold and quiet. Around her sat the most powerful people on Earth: generals, admirals, intelligence directors, and advisors. All of them wore the same expression: anger mixed with determination. On the wall screen, the recording of High Speaker Thesson's speech played one more time. His words echoed through the room like poison. "Temporary, a brief flash of activity. In 1,000 years, no one will remember your species existed." President Morrison pressed a button, and the screen went dark. She looked around the table at the faces of her advisors. 40 years, she said. Her voice was soft, but everyone heard her clearly. 40 years we have worked to build relationships with the conquered. We have signed treaties. We have traded our goods. We have sent our sons and daughters to patrol their borders, to protect their colonies, to fight their enemies, and this is what we receive in return." No one spoke. There was nothing to say. The president turned to a man sitting at the far end of the table. He was thin and quiet, with glasses and graying hair. His name was Ryan Ellis, and he led the Department of Stellar Affairs. "Ryan," the president said, "tell them about Lighthouse." Ryan Ellis stood up and walked to the front of the room. He pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared in the air, showing a complex web of lines and connections that spread across the known galaxy. 23 years ago, he began, a small group of analysts started asking a simple question. What would happen if Earth left the galactic conquered? Not a war, not a conflict, just a quiet withdrawal from all our agreements. Admiral Kevin Park, commander of Earth's space fleet, frowned. "We have treaties with 143 species. Trade agreements, defense pacts, technology sharing deals. You cannot simply cancel all of them overnight." "Actually," Ryan said, "we can. And we have spent 23 years preparing for exactly that." He pointed to the holographic display. "Let me show you what the galaxy does not understand about humanity." The display changed, showing a medical facility on a distant world. The Vethani medical colonies produce drugs that heal diseases across 30 star systems. 80% of those drugs require a compound found in an Earth plant called foxglove. We have been delivering weekly shipments for 15 years. Without those shipments, their production stops completely. The display changed again. The Oroshan communication network is the fastest in the galaxy, 1,700 relay stations spanning 10,000 light-years. All of them run on software developed by human engineers and maintained by human technicians. Another change. The Kethmari merchant convoys travel through the Vex corridor every day. It is one of the most dangerous routes in known space. The patrols that protect those convoys are staffed almost entirely by human crews. Ryan looked around the room. "Shall I continue? The Droon Orbital Defense Grid, the Velori Cultural Archives, jump gate stabilizers, water purification systems, agricultural supplies, medical equipment, patrol routes, engineering support." He turned off the display. "For 40 years, we have done the jobs that other species considered beneath them. The dangerous jobs, the boring jobs, the essential jobs that keep civilizations running but offer no glory. We did these things because we wanted to prove our worth. We wanted to be accepted." The president stood up. "And now we know the truth. They will never accept us. No matter how hard we work, no matter how much we sacrifice, we will always be temporary to them." General Lisa Crawford, a woman with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing? If we withdraw from everything at once, there will be chaos. They might see it as an act of aggression." "No," Ryan said. "They will see it as a tantrum, a childish reaction from a primitive species. They will laugh at us, just as they laughed at Ambassador Carter." "Then why do it?" the Admiral asked. Ryan smiled for the first time. "Because they will only laugh for about 3 days. After that, they will begin to understand what they have lost." The room was silent for a long moment. President Morrison walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over Washington. Somewhere out there, beyond the sky, 7 billion humans were waiting to learn what their leaders would decide. "I have thought about this for 3 days, the president said, without turning around. "I have read the reports. I have studied the projections. I have considered every possible outcome." She turned to face the room. "We have spent 40 years trying to earn a place in the galaxy. We have given everything we had. Our technology, our resources, our people, and they still see us as nothing." Her voice grew harder. "No more. If they do not want us as partners, then they will learn to live without us entirely. Ryan, activate Project Lighthouse. Ryan Ellis nodded. Yes, Madam President. Over the next 12 hours, a message was prepared. It was short and simple, written in the formal language of galactic diplomacy. At exactly midnight, Greenwich Mean Time, it was transmitted simultaneously to every member species of the Galactic Concord. To all members of the Galactic Concord, effective immediately, the United Earth Government hereby withdraws from all treaties, pacts, and agreements with member species of the Concord. All human personnel, assets, and resources will be recalled to human space within 30 standard days. We wish you well. This communication requires no response. The message went out in every language, to every planet, to every station and ship and colony that had any connection to humanity. There was no explanation, no negotiation, no chance to discuss or debate, just silence. In the Great Hall on Axis Prime, High Speaker Thesson received the message in the middle of the night. He read it 3 times, certain that he had misunderstood something. Then he called an emergency meeting of his staff. "What does this mean?" he demanded. "What are they trying to accomplish?" His advisors had no answers. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in government buildings and council chambers. Species who had barely thought about humanity for decades suddenly found themselves reading the same short message over and over again. The humans were leaving. All of them. Everywhere. All at once. At first, most species reacted exactly as Ryan Ellis had predicted. They laughed. They mocked the primitive humans for their childish response to a simple political defeat. Some even celebrated, glad to be rid of a species they had always found annoying. But slowly, in the days that followed, the laughter began to fade, because slowly, the galaxy began to break. The first crisis came 6 hours after the message was sent. On the planet Seren 4, deep in Vithani space, a medical administrator named Keever stared at his communication screen in disbelief. The message was simple. All human supply ships had been recalled. No more deliveries would arrive. Keever rushed to his storage facilities and began counting. The compound they needed, the one extracted from the Earth plant called Foxglove, was running low. They had enough for perhaps 2 months. After that, production would stop. The Vithani medical colonies supplied healing drugs to 30 star systems. Billions of beings depended on those drugs. Without the human deliveries, there would be no way to continue. Keever sent an urgent message to his government. Similar messages were already flooding in from 100 other facilities. On the Oroshan homeworld, a very different kind of panic was beginning. The Oroshan were proud of their communication network. It was the fastest and most reliable system in the known galaxy. For 5,000 years, they had maintained it as a symbol of their technological superiority. But 3 years ago, they had quietly hired human engineers to upgrade the system. The work was boring and difficult, the kind of job that young Oroshan technicians did not want to do. The humans did it without complaint, working long hours for little recognition. Now those engineers were packing their belongings. Administrator Velathon rushed to the main control center and found the senior human engineer, a woman named Amy Patterson, supervising the shutdown of her team's workstations. "You cannot leave," Velathon said, trying to keep his voice calm. "The network depends on your maintenance protocols. Without them, we will begin losing relay stations within 6 months. Amy looked at him with tired eyes. "I'm sorry, Administrator. Our orders are clear. All personnel must return to human space within 30 days. We will pay you more," Velathon offered desperately. "We will give you better quarters. Whatever you want." Amy shook her head slowly. It was never about the money. It was never about the quarters. We just wanted to be respected, to be treated like we mattered. She picked up her bag. "I hope your network survives, I really do. Goodbye, Administrator." She walked out without looking back. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy in the days that followed. The Kethmari discovered that the patrol routes protecting their merchant convoys through the dangerous Vex corridor were suddenly empty. Human ships had been maintaining those routes for decades, flying through asteroid fields and radiation zones that other species considered too hazardous. Now, those ships were gone. Within a week, 3 Kethmari convoys were attacked by pirates. The losses were enormous. The Droon received an urgent report from their military command. The orbital defense grid protecting their homeworld had been upgraded by human technicians 5 years ago. The new systems required regular maintenance that only the humans understood. Without that maintenance, the grid would begin to fail within 8 months. The Droon immediately tried to learn the systems themselves, but the documentation was incomplete. The humans had never been asked to share their knowledge fully. No one had thought it was important. On 17 different worlds, jump gates began showing error warnings. The stabilization systems that kept them safe had been designed and installed by human engineers. When those engineers left, they took their expertise with them. Water purification plants started failing on colony worlds that had trusted human technology to keep their populations alive. Agricultural shipments that had been running smoothly for years suddenly stopped. Research stations lost access to data networks that human programmers had built. Every day brought new emergencies. Every day the true scope of humanity's contribution to the galaxy became clearer. High Speaker Thesson called an emergency session of the Galactic Concord. The Great Hall was full of frightened voices and angry accusations. "This is blackmail," Thesson declared, his crystalline form pulsing with barely controlled fury. "This is extortion. The humans are trying to hold the galaxy hostage." But when he looked around the chamber, he noticed something strange. The human seat was empty. Ambassador Carter had returned to Earth days ago. He had left nothing behind except a small note on his desk. One of Thesson's aides brought him the note. The High Speaker read it in silence, and for the first time in his long life, he felt something he did not recognize. The note said, "We were never builders. We were never creators. We were temporary. You were right." In the weeks that followed, the Concord sent delegation after delegation to Earth. Each one was received politely in a small office building in a city called Geneva. Each one met with a young woman named Emma Walsh, a mid-level diplomat with a pleasant smile. The Valori offered to expand Earth's colonial rights to 10 new star systems. Emma thanked them for the offer and said she would pass the message along. The Kethmari offered a formal seat on the High Council, something no junior species had ever received. Emma nodded politely and took notes. The Orashan offered technology transfers worth trillions of credits, access to knowledge that humanity had been denied for decades. Emma smiled and said she appreciated their generosity, but the answer was always the same. Earth was currently focused on internal development priorities. Perhaps they could discuss these matters again in the future. The delegations returned home with nothing. High Speaker Thesson could not understand it. Why would the humans reject such generous offers? What could they possibly hope to gain by isolating themselves from the galaxy? He did not realize that humans had learned something important during their 40 years among the stars. They had learned that respect could not be bought or traded for. It had to be earned. And sometimes the only way to earn it was to walk away and let others discover how much they had lost. The galaxy was falling apart. Systems that had worked smoothly for centuries were now breaking down. Species that had barely thought about humanity were now desperate for human help. And on Earth, humanity was doing something unexpected. They were building. 1 year passed. The Galactic Concord had survived its crisis, but barely. The Vithani had found a synthetic replacement for the Foxglove compound, But it was expensive and less effective. The Orashan communication network had lost dozens of relay stations and now had gaps that could take decades to repair. The Kethamari merchant convoys traveled under heavy guard, their profits cut in half by the cost of protection. Throughout the galaxy, species had learned to do without human help. It was hard and painful, but they had managed. Now, a new question was on everyone's mind. What were the humans doing? Earth had sealed its borders. Human space was closed to all outside visitors. The few observation satellites that could peek into human territory showed construction on a massive scale. But the details were impossible to determine. Rumors spread through the Concord. Some said the humans were building a war fleet to attack. Others claimed they were constructing defensive walls to hide behind forever. A few whispered that humanity had found something, some ancient technology or new discovery that would change everything. The truth was simpler and more remarkable than any rumor. In the orbital shipyards above Earth, a woman named Megan Torres stood before a viewport and watched the skeleton of a new vessel take shape. She was chief engineer of the most ambitious project in human history, and she still could not quite believe what they were creating. For 40 years, humanity had worked for other species. They had learned alien technologies, studied alien designs, and mastered alien systems. They had taken the boring jobs, the dangerous jobs, the jobs that no one else wanted. And all the while, they had been learning. Now, for the first time, they were applying everything they had learned to purely human designs. The ship taking shape before Megan was called the Resolute. It was not built from any single alien technology. It was something new, a combination of the best ideas from 100 different species, redesigned and improved by human engineers who had spent decades studying what worked and what did not. Commander Nathan Cole walked up beside her and studied the ship in silence. He was a veteran of the patrol routes, a man who had spent 20 years protecting convoys and fighting pirates in the most dangerous parts of the galaxy. He had been chosen to command the Resolute. The speed tests came back, Megan said, without turning around. She is faster than anything the Valori have, faster than anything anyone has. Nathan nodded slowly. And the shields? Better than the Droon. Our power systems are more efficient, so we can maintain full protection for 3 times as long. Megan finally turned to look at him. We spent 40 years learning everything the galaxy could teach us. They never asked what we might do with that knowledge. They never imagined we were paying attention. Across human space, similar transformations were taking place. On colony worlds that had once depended on alien trade networks, new industries were rising. Human farmers had learned agricultural techniques from a dozen different species, and now they were combining those techniques in ways no one had ever tried before. Crop yields were doubling, new food sources were being developed. Human factories were producing goods that combined the elegance of Orashan design with the durability of Droon manufacturing. Human scientists were making discoveries that merged Valori theoretical physics with Kethmari practical engineering. Humanity was not just surviving, they were thriving, and they were doing it alone. On Earth, President Morrison met regularly with her advisors to review the progress. In 12 months, humanity had accomplished what should have taken decades. The fleet was growing. The economy was stronger than ever. The population was united in a way it had never been before. "The Concord keeps sending messages," reported Emma Walsh, now promoted to Director of External Relations. "They want to discuss reintegration. They are offering more concessions every month." President Morrison shook her head. "We do not need their concessions. We do not need their approval. We are building our own future now." "Yes, Madam President, but there is something else." Emma pulled up a holographic display showing the outer regions of the galaxy. Our long-range sensors have detected movement beyond the rim, large movement. Admiral Kevin Park leaned forward, his face grim. The Vex. The Vex were the nightmare of the galaxy. They were predators from beyond known space, parasitic creatures that consumed everything in their path. For centuries, a network of defense stations in the outer sectors had held them back. Humanity had helped build and maintain those stations. When we left, Admiral Park said slowly, we left gaps in the defense network. Gaps that the Concord has not been able to fill. The Vex are coming, Emma confirmed. Our analysts estimate they will breach the defensive perimeter within 6 months. The room was silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Concord would face an enemy they were not prepared to fight. Species that had laughed at humanity would face destruction. President Morrison stood and walked to the window. Outside, the night sky was full of stars, full of worlds that had scorned her people as temporary and forgettable. What would the old humanity do? She asked quietly. The humanity that begged for scraps at the Concord's table? The humanity that was grateful just to be tolerated? No one answered. That humanity would rush to help, the president continued. We would send our ships and our people to save those who called us nothing. We would sacrifice ourselves again, hoping that this time they would finally see our value. She turned to face her advisors. But we are not that humanity anymore. We will not beg. We will not sacrifice ourselves for those who see us as tools. She paused. However, we are also not monsters. When the time comes, we will help. But we will help on our terms, as equals, or not at all. She looked at Admiral Park. Is the fleet ready? The Admiral nodded. The Resolute and 400 sister ships, the most advanced vessels ever built by any species. They are ready, Madam President. Good, she said. Now we wait. The galaxy made its choice when it scorned us. Soon, they will have to make another choice. And this time, they will understand exactly what they are choosing. Outside the window, the stars continued to shine. And somewhere in the darkness between them, something hungry was getting closer. The Vex came through the gaps like a flood breaking through a dam. 12 species lost colonies in the first wave. The Oroshan fleet, stretched thin after a year of covering abandoned patrol routes, was caught out of position. 37 ships were destroyed in a single battle. The Kethmari lost 2 major trading hubs. The Droon homeworld itself came under direct assault for the first time in 3,000 years. High Speaker Thesson stood in the Great Hall of Axis Prime and watched the reports come in. His crystalline form was dim now, nearly dark, the light inside him fading with each new disaster. The chamber was full of frightened voices. Representatives shouted at each other, blamed each other, demanded that someone do something. But there was nothing to do. The Vex were too many, too fast, too hungry. An aide approached Thessan with a report. High Speaker, we have lost contact with the Vethani medical colonies. The Vex have reached Seren 4. Thessan closed his eyes. Seren 4. The planet that had sent the first urgent message about the Foxglove compound. The planet that had been the first to understand what humanity's departure truly meant. Is there any hope? Thessan asked quietly. The aide hesitated. There is one option, High Speaker. We could ask the humans for help. Thessan felt something twist inside him. The humans. The species he had called temporary. The species he had mocked before the entire galaxy. The species he had driven away with his pride and his contempt. They will not come, he said. Why would they? After everything we did to them. We must try, High Speaker. We have no other choice. Thessan stood in silence for a long moment. Then he walked to the center of the great hall and raised his hand for silence. Slowly, the shouting stopped. Every eye turned to him. "My fellow members of the Conquered," he began, and his voice was heavy with shame. "I must do something I have never done before. I must admit that I was wrong." The chamber was completely quiet. "1 year ago, I stood in this hall and called humanity temporary. I said they were not builders, not creators. I said that, in 1,000 years, no one would remember they existed." He paused. "I was a fool." He took a deep breath. "We need them. We need the species we scorned. We need the partners we rejected. And so before all of you, I will do what must be done." He turned to face the empty human seat, the chair that had been vacant for over a year. "On behalf of the Galactic Concord, I call upon our human friends. We acknowledge our errors. We recognize our mistakes. We ask for your help in our darkest hour." The message was transmitted to Earth, and then the waiting began. For 3 days, there was no response. The Vex continued their advance. More colonies fell. More ships were destroyed. Hope began to fade across the galaxy. On the 4th day, something emerged from the Sol system. The galactic sensors detected it first. A massive energy signature, larger than anything they had recorded before. At first, the analysts thought it was a weapon. Then the signature separated into hundreds of smaller readings, each one moving in perfect formation. It was a fleet, 500 vessels, arranged in a pattern like an arrow pointed at the heart of the galaxy. At the front of the formation flew a single ship, larger than the others, its hull gleaming with reflected starlight. The Resolute. Admiral Nathan Cole stood on the bridge and watched the stars stretch past as his fleet accelerated toward the battle zone. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They were young, most of them, born after humanity had joined the Concord. They had grown up hearing stories of how the galaxy had treated their people. Now they were going to save that galaxy anyway. "Admiral," said his communications officer, a young man named Derek Powell. "The Concord is hailing us. High Speaker Thesson wishes to speak with you." Nathan nodded. "Put him through." Thesson's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired and afraid, his light almost completely dim. "Admiral Cole," Thesson said, "you came. I did not dare to hope." "We came," Nathan said simply. "But we need to be clear about something, High Speaker. We are not here as your servants. We are not here to beg for acceptance or prove our worth. We are here because it is the right thing to do. Because when a galaxy is in danger, humanity does not look away." Thesson bowed his head. "I understand, Admiral. What do you need from us?" "Stay out of our way. Coordinate with our tactical officers. And when this is over, we will discuss a new relationship between humanity and the Concord. A relationship between equals." "Yes, Admiral. Whatever you require." The transmission ended. The Battle of the Rim, as it would later be called, lasted 18 hours. The Vex had never faced an enemy like the human fleet. The new vessels were faster than anything the parasites had encountered, able to dodge attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. Their weapons were devastating, combining technologies from a dozen species into something entirely new, and the humans fought with a fury that made even the mindless Vex hesitate. Nathan Cole commanded from the bridge of the Resolute, directing his ships with calm precision. Around him, the battle raged. Ships were destroyed on both sides. Lives were lost. But slowly, steadily, the tide began to turn. When the sun rose on the 19th hour, the Vex were retreating. Their forces broke apart, scattered, fled toward the darkness beyond the rim. The galaxy was saved. Nathan stood on the bridge as the damage reports came in. 32 human ships had been lost, thousands of human lives given to protect species that had scorned them. "Admiral," Derek said quietly, "the Concord is requesting that you address their assembly. They want to discuss reintegration." Nathan was silent for a long moment. He thought about the years of scorn and rejection. He thought about the ambassadors who had been mocked, the workers who had been overlooked, the soldiers who had been forgotten. Then he thought about the people his fleet had just saved, the billions of lives that would continue because humanity had chosen to help. "Tell them I will attend," he said, finally. "But make sure they understand something. We are not going back to the way things were. We are not junior partners. We are not temporary." He looked out at the stars, at the galaxy that had finally learned what humanity was worth. "We are equals, or we are nothing at all." 3 months later, Ambassador Claire Donovan stood in the Great Hall of Axis Prime. The human seat was no longer at the edge of the chamber. It was at the center. She looked out at the 216 species that had gathered to hear her speak. She saw the Vailori and the Ketmari, the Oroshan, and the Droon. She saw High Speaker Thesson, his light slowly returning now that hope had been restored. "We do not seek revenge," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We do not seek dominion. We seek only what we have always sought, respect. Recognition that we are partners, not servants, allies, not tools." She smiled slightly. "The galaxy taught us everything it knew. But the one thing you never understood, the one thing you never imagined, is what happens when you underestimate humanity. We do not break. We do not fade away. We adapt. We grow. And when we return as something new." The chamber was silent, listening. "Now," Ambassador Donovan said, "shall we discuss the future together?" And for the first time in the long history of the Galactic Concord, every species in the chamber rose in respect for humanity. The silence was over. The waiting was done. And Earth had finally found its place among the stars.